Testing, testing.
I just do what they tell me. Yep. Mask on, mask off, it doesn't matter.
So I'll do like a quick little introduction. Thanking everyone. This is our first Tuesday event since March 3rd.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I've never done one before. And of
Let's
course,
wing it.
Sammy's not here, so I'm not squeezing my butt cheeks at all.
Not at all. It's all new to me too, so I'm all about winging.
Yeah, and look, it's all
My
my
first
sauce.
sauce, 4 months.
This is a low stress.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So it's always the recording part, even though there's no one on there but Sammy, but it's fine. So I'll do this and then I'll hand it over probably to you. And then, like I said, we might just share this one because it was too painful to do 5 different things.
No, that works.
So, yeah.
So you're asking about barriers and what else?
So I'm just gonna say for the first one, what were some of the barriers when we first got into your occupation? How did you? And then where do you see yourself
We
in
have 5 years. That's a hard one.
That is a
Yeah.
really hard one.
the 5 years? What's your vision? For the future? And then if you could do anything different in your career, what would it be? What would you tell a woman to do different? And then I had a last one about who was one of your mentors or who made the difference in your life. Can you tell us about that? Or maybe I should start out with that one. That one's kind of easy one, but maybe not. Okay.
I mean, it was just so coincidental. I took a picture of that car and I was like, I had it all spec'd out. I got the price and I was like, I really don't want to buy a car that comes from Indianapolis or Louisville, you know, just, and I looked out front of the building and I'm like, that is my car. I just,
Did you just buy a car?
no,
Oh.
but I was going to, and Lori bought it. I spec'd it out for her.
I haven't had a car. No, I've had it for a couple of years. It's a beautiful blue BMW 330i.
Nice.
It is beautiful.
Stick shift. I had a custom order it because I'm like a stick shift girl.
How are you?
I love it. And I get a lot of, it really is a beautiful, beautiful color. So I get a lot of people.
And you don't know what's going to steal it. Most people can't even try to stick it.
Oh, I can.
The person most likely to steal it can try to steal it. But it was so funny though. I mean, just what a big coincidence. I had it all ready, and I probably wasn't going to buy it, but I wanted to. And then I looked out front and I was like, somebody has my car.
We'll have to go for a ride.
Angie's car is always perfect. You know, yeah, clean. Mine is.
I
have
live in
kids.
my car. Yeah.
It's not clean today. Believe it or not, it's not. Most days it is.
But I will send you it.
We can say we're sort of some apart.
No masks.
Exactly. Hey, Benjamin.
You're right in front.
Closer to heaven.
Have you ever worked for men?
Nope.
All right, everyone. Welcome to our first Tuesday of the month. This is our official first Tuesday back since March 3rd of 2020. So welcome back. If you aren't familiar with our first Tuesday event, we hold informational sharing and networking opportunities the first Tuesday of every month. This is meant to provide an opportunity for small business, academia, government, and even regional and state stakeholders to potentially connect and collaborate on concentrated technologies, as well as provide a forum for subject matter awareness or promotion of specific accomplishments that are happening right here in our backyard. We at Purdue at Westgate strive to be the regional hub of connection, and the First Tuesday event is one of many different programs that we provide to accomplish this goal. This particular event helps promote the women in defense that are sitting less than a mile from this facility, but have accomplished the feat of impacting others, not just women, within the region and state, and even throughout the US. We have collaborated with the federally employed women of the Hoosier Hills chapter to provide this exciting panel of accomplished women today. Our moderator today will be Maureen Simstrong. Maureen is currently serving as the COR, Certification Manager for Crane in the Contracts Department. She has made working for the Department of Defense almost a lifelong career, since she has been a Crane for 20 years, as has been with the government for a total of 35 years. Allow me to introduce you to our moderator, Maureen Simstrong, and she will introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Like I said, I've been in the government for 35 years. I've had 14 different duty stations, and I'm so proud of this moment because it's taken 35 years before I worked under a female commanding officer or executive assistant. So I just technical director. So with Colonel Vasquez, thank you. It took me 35 years to meet a female commanding officer. So to my immediate left, we have Colonel Santi B. Vasquez assumed command of the Crane Army Ammunition Activity on July 13th, 2021. Since joining the Army, Colonel Vasquez has held a number of leadership roles ranging from platoon leader and battalion S4 officer, brigade adjutant, company commander, assistant supporting operations officer, small group instructor, supply service as an officer, brigade S4 logistics operation officer, and brigade support battalion commander and chief of staff for the U.S. Army Tank Automotive and Armaments Command. So thank you so much for joining. And then we have Dr. Angela Lewis. Everybody should know. She serves as the Division Technical Director for the Navy Surface Warfare Center, Crane Division, and is an appointed member of the Senior Executive Service. Dr. Lewis holds a Bachelor of Science in Sociology and a Master's degree in Business Administration, both from Ball State University, and a PhD in Management from Sullivan University. She also received the Public Management Certification from Indiana University. She was selected by the Indiana Commission for Women as a torchbearer in 2015 for significant achievements as a woman in government and for her contributions to her employer, local community, and state. She is a member of the Southern Indiana section of the American Society of Naval Engineers, a member of the Crane Chapter Federal Managers Association, and a lifetime member and past president of the Hoosier Hills Chapter of the Federally Employed Women. She recently served 8 years as president of the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence County and is the busiest person I know. Thank you. And then we have somebody else that I work with, Mrs. Lori Zipes. Mrs. Zipes transferred to the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane, Indiana, to serve as the chief engineer for cybersecurity in the Expeditionary Electromagnetic Warfare Division. In March 2021, Ms. Zipes was selected as Crane's command chief engineer. And that's another one. I've never seen a female chief engineer ever. So thank you for that. In this position, she is responsible for focusing on Crane's technical rigor, continuing to implement and improve the technical career competency program, and guiding the transformation to a fully digital engineering organization. And last, but by no means least, we have Monica Hutchins, which I met today, and you really need to, their full bios are out on the site on the Eventbrite link, and you really need to read it. It's very impressive because Monica comes from us from the Pentagon. So as an experienced chief strategist with a demonstrated history of working in the defense and space industry, skilled in government, intelligence, operational planning, knowledge management, and leadership, strong business development professional, graduated from Bridging the Gap Department of the Navy Executive Management Program. Thank you, Monica, for being here today. We have some questions, and if we have any time over, of course, this is just for an hour, but we have any time over. If you please have a question, please get it ready so we can ask. So we just have some questions to start out. And if I could just have the Colonel start out and then everybody give the response. So on your journey to where you got, can you tell us some of the barriers or challenges with getting to where you are now that you had to do?
Yeah, so first, thank you guys for allowing me to be here. And again, being amongst this esteemed panel, I'm totally like
punching above my weight class with you guys. So it's just an honor to be here with y'all. So I think that the standard answer is that the Army is a lot different than we were back 23 years ago. So I think the most common barriers were just perceived the stereotypes, that women weren't as capable. I've always been a logistics officer. I am a quartermaster by trade. So I started in, I joke, but a water platoon, so purifying water. And we were always out on rotation supporting the maneuver brigades. And so that women weren't really accepted as much in the field, or that just, there was just more misunderstandings or lack of understanding, and that we were truly just as capable as a male soldier. And so kind of having, I always joke to you, I was had to run twice as fast and outsmart them. And by them, I don't mean it to be our male audience members, but it was, you had to prove your worth. And predominantly my commanders at that time were all male, both in the maneuver brigades as well as in the support battalions. So they understood more because we were predominantly heavier in the female population in all the support battalions. But it was also, oh, well, you're a girl, so you're going to go to the support battalion. Instead of going, no, I'm going to be in this maneuver battalion, or I'm going to be with this, maneuver brigade. I'm going to support you, and you're going to get the best support that you can, regardless of my gender. So I would say it was breaking down perceptions that we weren't as equal or we weren't as capable. And I think over the time, number one, just the population of us, so the more females we had, the more capable, and they saw us doing all kinds of things, and so my first division was the 101st Airborne Division, which is air assault. So, rappelling out of helicopters and not letting stuff slow us down, and, kind of just proving that it didn't matter your gender, it mattered who you were, and how capable you were, regardless of where you came from. So, yeah.
So thank you, Maureen. It's good to see everybody. It seems a little strange talking on a microphone with you all right here, but I do think they are recording. So that's why we're doing that. Thank you for your service. And, as you talked, and you talked about the water brigade and purifying and cleaning water, that's something we have in common. So most people know that my path at Crane has been different than anyone else's, but it did include a stint in the water treatment facility, which is a part of Naval Facilities Command now. And I worked in the water and wastewater treatment plant after Crane had a reduction in force. And so just thought I would throw that in there. I was a state certified water plant operator as well. When we think about barriers and challenges, from a gender perspective, the stereotypes is something that comes up very often. I think I would, just offer from my seat. I started at Crane and I was just out of high school. I hadn't even had my first day at college yet. And I thought I wanted to be a math teacher. And so I had put on my application for employment, I had put secondary education mathematics. And I had a call from Crane's Human Resources office asking me if I was interested in an intern position that summer. And I was working in the drive-thru at McDonald's when I got the call, and I got in trouble for getting a call at work, but I did. And luckily they let me take it. And the question was, will you have a math degree when you graduate from college or an education degree? And I didn't know really anything about Crane, but I was fairly confident it wasn't a school. So I said mathematics, and that's how I got my foot in the door, so to speak, at Crane Division. And after taking the 2 5-hour calculus classes and a couple of other very difficult math classes, I had been asked to also pick up computer science because I worked in the IT division. And I realized that that wasn't for me. So I changed my path at school, like many college kids do. And when I changed to first business and then sociology, I was just fortunate to be able to keep my job, because at that point, Crane had not hired business students into the internship program. And they had this new thing at the time called email, where they could communicate with supervisors in kind of a mass fashion. And so there was a logistics branch manager who was an engineering manager, actually, and he asked the logistics team if they needed help and if a business student could help. And that was, a
pretty, I won't say it was completely unprecedented, but it wasn't within the norm at the time. And so, I think that I have fought a career at Crane of being a little bit atypical for senior leadership roles. Certainly, at the time that I went to work as a supervisor, I started managing work in IT and corporate business, and then also out in our global deterrence and defense department when Mr. Harkness up here in the front selected me as his department deputy. And so I would just say that people do try to kind of use their past experience and their interactions with people to, evaluate and decide, maybe what you would be good at or what box you belong in. And, I was always kind of fighting to get out of the box. But when I was selected to go back to a technical department at Crane at the department level, it was Ben who said that, he had worked with me in a couple of different instances and that I thought different than him. And so he felt like that as a senior leader in the organization, if he surrounded himself with people who were just like him, that he may not grow and that may not be the best for the department. And so because I was different, then he was willing to take a chance on me as, his partner in those times. And I learned from him and he learned from me, and we made a great team. So I do think that that it's quite often that, people will look at you and that we look at ourselves. I could have stayed in Crane's corporate world and business departments and enjoyed that work quite a bit. And when I kind of branched out, I went down to Panama City a couple of years ago for a few months as their deputy technical director. And it really didn't matter down there what my education background was. It was, I was valued for what I brought to the table and the experience that I had. And so that's kind of what caused me to think that, I could handle this technical director role at Crane when I came back and I applied for that. So I would say just don't keep yourself in a box unnecessarily. But if you can surround yourself too with people that see the potential that you have and give you opportunities, that's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
All right, so I'll begin also with my appreciation for being invited today. This is actually the first time I've been asked to sit on a panel like this, and I could not be more pleased or honored to be with this particular panel. Great, impressive folks to be with. And I have never worked with water purification, but I do love the water, which is why I work for the Navy. So my career path, engineer from the start, intentionally stayed very technical throughout most of my career. A couple little forays into, a little bit of management here or administration there, which was interesting. But very much wanted to stay technical, right? So there was and I did not spend I was actually at Panama City for the first part of my career, right? And then came up to Crane here just recently. But it was clear to me, particularly at that organization, but probably to some extent at all the warfare centers and all technical organizations, that when you went management side, you tended to stay there, and particularly women. I did not really see a lot of women head towards the management side and come back to technical. Very hard to navigate back out. And I just thought, I went to engineering school for a reason, right? I love it. I admit it. And so it's been very intentional for me. But I realized at the time that in a way that was potentially kind of career limiting because there was not a very robust technical track. That has changed, which is wonderful. I never saw myself in a position like this. Part of one of, I think, not really a barrier, but I think a challenge for me was that earlier in my career, when I looked up at the leaders or even had opportunities to interact with the leaders, obviously they didn't look like me, right? But they also really didn't act like me. They didn't think the way I did. They didn't lead the way I did. And my perception of that at the time was that I didn't fit then, right? And I wasn't going to, didn't want to be in that part of the organization. So fast forward and kind of a variation of what Angie explained, which was that over time, as I watched people in these senior roles, and generally men, right, that I would see these different personalities and they would be in that role and they would do things a little bit differently. And at some point I kind of had this realization that, well, if that person did it differently and that person did it differently, then I could go in there and do it differently too. And it really doesn't matter what my gender is. It's more about how you choose to take on the job and if you're capable for the job. And so that combined with something that my father said to me many, many years ago that resonated with me when I was in that phase of, I don't want to be in leadership or management, right? I just don't understand why anyone would do that. And he said, and he was a professor at university, but moved up in his later career up to provost positions. And he said, you'll get into it when you see things that you want to change and you know that you can change. And he was right? Because I had enough time in where I kind of realized that I felt like things could be improved and that I had the skill set to do that. So that was probably one thing that led me to where I am now. As far as barriers, I've had that question asked me before by mentees, right? And my reaction initially is that there's always challenges and barriers seem very situation dependent, because I think about the things that happened to me, right? It's kind of, the natural inclination. And there was always just a slight difference in what it was that was happening at the time that felt like a challenge or a barrier. But I always felt like it was kind of an unsatisfactory answer. So I thought about it a little more, and it's really kind of what Colonel said, right? So this idea of respect and credibility, you have to earn it more in the technical field as a female. When I walk in the room, the first thought is not, there's the engineer. That's just a fact, right? Hopefully that is changing. And hopefully me being in this role will have that change, because people have to kind of recalibrate sometimes when they hear what my title is. I've actually had that happen a time or two, and there's never been anything negative, right? But you just kind of see that moment that you're the command chief engineer. Oh, and so hopefully that's changing. But I think that's definitely been a barrier, right? You really have to work harder and be better to get the credibility and respect that should come with the position. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate being here. I think as far as non-traditional career paths, probably fairly similar to a lot of folks. One of the first positions I had was a statistical data analyst at a hospital. I actually started off in engineering in college. I didn't love it. I'm sorry. I could do it. I realized that, but that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And ironically, one of the internships that I went on was at Ford Motor Company in Detroit. I went to school in Michigan originally. And I was like, wow, I don't think this is what I want to do every day. It was literally everyone with their computer in a cubicle, not talking to a lot of other folks. And even when they did kind of look up and acknowledge your existence, it wasn't real spontaneous or real interactive. I'm like, I don't know this is actually where I want to spend the rest of my life. And then fast forward to the Pentagon, I had to chuckle because there I am in a cubicle with a computer. I'm just slightly different people. So I think as far as barriers or challenges, I started off my career with the Air Force and spent it with operational flying units. That makes a huge difference because it's kind of to the point of it's your credibility. It's can you do your job or not? And that is what I saw mattered the most. And so I prepared more. I researched more. I made sure I was the best prepared person. I worked deployment lines. I volunteered to be out there on the flight line. That made a big difference. Just volunteering and having people also see you in different roles, even if they don't expect that's the role that you're going to be in, helps change that perception. And so being out there in the flying units with everyone flying, supporting deployments, supporting the readiness, everything that's involved in that whole deployment cycle, and doing non-combatant evacuation operations, NEOs. I think until what happened in Afghanistan a couple months ago, people are like, oh, what's a NEO? That's a NEO. When you have to move thousands of people in cargo and everything really, really quickly. So having done that in Japan and having practiced how do we move everyone out of South Korea quickly, gives you a different appreciation for logistics, for supply, for aircraft generation, for fuels, for the entire picture. And so being able to understand that and having that perspective gives you more credibility from an operational standpoint. So about 15 years in the Air Force, I translated a lot of technology into budget and congressional language. That was kind of one of the skills I had was I understand the technology enough. I don't have to be the SME, but I understand it enough to be able to help senior leadership and then congressional testimony as well. How do you shape that? What's the messaging? What's the story you're trying to tell? And found that that's where I felt I could add value and really be able to help tell the story of what we're trying to do from the operational perspective, and then also get the funding assigned to it. So it's been a great change coming here to Crane. Sometimes Maureen and I were talking, sometimes it's the least military of all the military bases we've been on. It's just kind of entertaining. Oh no, nope. So it's the challenge sometimes is the diversity of thought that folks bring is sometimes appreciated. It's not always appreciated. Sometimes it's more like, well, I don't know why you're trying to push this or why you're trying to bring this up. And it's not as a criticism. It's trying to pull a page out of the engineering handbook. It's critical analysis. It's saying there's another way to think about this. There's another way to approach this problem. And perhaps if we look at it differently, we might come up with a different solution. better or worse is a judgment call, but trying to have that challenge of how do you communicate with folks who don't have the same background, who haven't grown up in the same place. They don't necessarily know their neighbors or have, homecoming to go to every fall with folks. So how do you take, your background and really include that diversity to be able to bring the best out in everyone, kind of like this panel. So I think it's a fun challenge and happy to be here.
Looking back on your career, if you had done one thing different, or what would it be? And what would your advice be to younger women?
So I guess one thing I would have done differently if I could have, I actually started off in ROTC in college and I wanted to be a pilot. Also, ergo the engineering degree. But ironically, at the time, you had to have 20/20 vision. Had nothing to do with being female. I had 20/40. At that time, there wasn't LASIK. You couldn't correct it with contacts, whatever. And so that door closed. And I was like, well, now what do I do? And now also without that defined career path, because this is what you're going to do. And you go to flight school and you have this whole path laid out in front of you with the timing and milestones and gates. And I was like, wow, I really have to choose. I wish I had asked more questions about what all the different careers would have been, because you only know what you know, and you also don't know what you don't know about various careers. And so being able to have more exposure to different people and different types of careers in different industries. My dad was a teacher, my mom's a pediatrician. Neither of those were helpful at the time. That was not the network that helped me out. So I think looking back, and especially for anyone looking at possible career paths in the future, is just ask as many questions as you can of everybody you know, because you may not know what might spark that interest, or might say, oh, wow, that sounds kind of interesting. Can you tell me more? Could we meet for coffee? And I think having the confidence to do that at that point, I don't know if I would have gotten there, but it might have, changed the trajectory. As it stands, I'm really happy with what's happened. And I think doors open and close for reasons. But I'd say looking back, just having more of an exposure and more of an open mind to what the possibilities are, and not limit it kind of either to your own box or what you think it might be.
So would I do anything differently? Those questions always just makes my head explode, right? Because I'm so analytical, right? Like if I did something differently, it would all change, and then I have no idea whether I would like that better or not. So my pat answer is no. I really wouldn't do anything differently. Sorry, not sorry. I say that from a point now that I am incredibly happy in the position that I'm in, and I feel like I'm very much in a sweet spot. Just by whatever, right? 30 years and led me to here. And I just feel like this is where I'm supposed to be right now. I have had over those 30 years, good moments, bad moments, horrible moments, a real like crucible phase of my career that I never would have thought would have led me to this, but it did. And like I said, very happy about that. So yeah, I can't say that I would do anything differently. Even little things, right? Like I just feel like careers make sense in hindsight, I think. And I forget somebody said that, right? Like it might've been Steve Jobs, right? It's whatever path you think you're going to take, it's probably not going to be, but just keep going in the direction that feels right to you. And at some point when you're, getting your proverbial gold watch, you'll look back and say, oh, well, that was perfectly logical how I got to where I was at the end, right? So in regard to advice, I have a couple of things that I generally say as just advice in general for career stuff. So one is be the best you can be, right? Always keep learning, listen attentively to other people, seek out feedback. Some people will proactively give you feedback and other people won't. I think seeking out feedback is a good thing, and being receptive to it, even if it's hard to hear, because most people have your best interests at heart. And so that's, try to always be excellent, right? It's my phrase, or be excellent, be your best. Be flexible, because your career will not be exactly what you think it's probably going to be. Mine certainly, again, I never saw myself in this position, and certainly not in the middle of Indiana working for the Navy. But so things will change along the way, and you will change as your career grows and things happen with family and your personal development. So being open-minded about that, a little bit of what Monica said, right? Keep doors open. It's always a good thing, because it just gives you options, and you might never realize what other things are out there that are going to really click for you that you'll like. And what is my last one now? I'm going to forget it, of course. But yeah, so that's, I think, trying to remember what my third thing is that I always say, and now I've lost my train of thought. So I'll just pass the mic to Angie, but I think of it later. I'll share it.
Oh, you had to just jab me. So I, like Lori, I probably wouldn't change anything. If I had set out with a design and a plan to try to get to this role, I'm certain I would have probably messed it up. It wasn't on my radar. When I started at Crane, the only person that thought that I could run the place is my dad, and that is exactly what he said. When I told him that I got this internship, he had worked here in transportation right out of Vietnam, and he just wanted to be permanent, and he was a temporary and didn't get, converted over to permanent in time. And then here I came. He worked down here when I was born, and so he decided he had to leave his temporary job to go get a real job to be able to have insurance and all that stuff that you need when you have a new family. So he was so excited when I came home and told him that I had gotten this offer for an internship at Crane, and his response was, "You can run that place someday." And I told that story a lot, never really thinking that that the technical director position was even a position that I would want for most of my career. So I wouldn't change anything. I've been really blessed and just fortunate to work for great people, to have an organization such as Crane that invest in its people, continuing education, lots of opportunity, even in the worst of times when there was a loss of some workload associated with a BRAC decision that resulted in a reduction in force and the movement of people. And I ended up in public works at that time for 4 years nearly as a I went there as a wage grade 3 laborer into the maintenance and utilities where no woman had ever worked, let alone one that was 20 years younger than everybody else in the organization. And we had one bathroom. They had to make a sign so we could turn it around. And I was working with a lot of people, my dad and my grandfather's age at that time, and I think the word that I would use is perseverance. I think forward then when I was in human resources, and I really just wanted to be a branch manager. I wanted to manage the group where I worked, and I came to work every day preparing to be that person. And I went through a job announcement process and a selection where I wasn't selected, and I didn't handle it very well. I thought the stupid decision, stupid division manager. No, not at all. It was probably a couple of years past that before I could really look in the mirror and truthfully understand what my own actions and behaviors at that time did to contribute to not being selected. And, from that point forward, I just really tried to understand myself a lot better and kind of go with the punches. I might still be sitting there, maybe as the HR division manager by now, or I might have just been happy in the branch job. I don't know. But, facing kind of that adversity is how I felt. Someone with a blessed life who's not really faced real tragedy took that pretty hard. But it was just a non-selection, and it did cause me to go down a different path. I certainly didn't intend at the deputy time when Ben selected me to go to global deterrence and defense. I applied on the deputy opening at that time because the corporate operations deputy was going to be filled too. And I had spent 15 years in corporate operations, so I thought that I would be a decent candidate for that job. And when I was selected to go global, it didn't occur to me not to accept, but it certainly surprised me. And, I didn't really understand what the organization had in mind by thinking that I would be good out there, but I was open to it. So, I kind of went with the flow and have always been willing to, the two pieces of advice that I give people that has worked for me is my dad wanted me to always work hard. So no matter what, if I was working hard and giving my best effort, that's all he ever asked for. And that was not really enough for my mom.
My mom wanted me to be nice. I had to be nice and get good citizenship grades, and I had to have friends, and I couldn't get in fights, and teachers had to like me. That was so important. So I just try to work hard and be nice to people. Did you remember what you wanted to say?
I'll make it quick. It's basically the idea that your career is your career and you need to own it, right? And so, you know, that when you're very, very young and you're just coming out of college, you're used to kind of telling people what to do. It took me a while to realize that I wasn't going to be handheld through my career, that I needed to figure out what I wanted and then go get it, right? And so make the choices that work for you and your family, whatever your situation is. And sometimes you might have to make really hard choices. And that's happened to me a couple of times. But you have to do what feels right to you, so that at the end of your days, you can feel like you're rewarded in what you're doing. You're proud of what you're doing. You're happy. You've got the career and the life that you want. And when you reach the end of your career, that you look back with a lot of pride that you contributed what you could.
Awesome. Though it's hard to be last after that. So I would really kind of parallel what Dr. Lewis said. So I think when I look back, there aren't things that I would necessarily change, but there are experiences that I wish I would have learned earlier. Two of them are, one, it's a self-awareness thing, and it's not letting emotion hijack you, because that is something as a younger officer, it really can lose credibility really fast. They don't see you as fair, firm, and consistent, and regardless of gender, nobody wants to work for that boss. So knowing that about yourself, that you have, and I'm not going to say we all have trigger people, but you all have trigger people that just like, you're looking at them and you're like, holy Hannah, this kid, woof, you see them come in the room and it's just going to light you on fire, so, and that still happens to this day, like 23 years later, you have to own that though. And you have to be like, hey, how are you doing today? What's going on? And be able to treat them with as much dignity as respect as anybody else, even though they're going to push every button in the world, right? So I wish I would have known that earlier, because I probably wouldn't have said, or I'm very transparent and I'm very blunt. That's sometimes it's a good thing being in the Army, because you can be like, darn Army person, but it also is not so good, because you want to leave everybody feeling as much as it was a positive encounter, even when it contains potential criticism or constructive criticism to try to get behaviors that you need or want out. So I wish I would have learned that as a younger, maybe lieutenant, The second thing is kind of on the same thing, is that there are, what I learned early, because you're learning your job, your platoon, or this division or this branch. And then as you go up, the way the Army is structured, and I'm assuming similar corporate, is it expands, your horizon and your overall view expands. But when I was younger, things were very black and white to me. It's right or it's wrong. You're good or you're bad. You're this or you're that. And it's taken, not that it's taken a lot of time, but to truly see that there are so many colors of shades of gray in between black and white. It's like when a subordinate or person comes to talk to you, it's not that they're right or wrong. It's what made them choose that, what made that decision happen. There had to be something, and understanding that the in between is usually where the truth lies and where the true problem or issue or concern is. And so whether it's you're not getting your supplies on time, or people want to look the other way, or whatever it is that strikes that compass of you have to understand that it's not as just, well, they're this and they're that. It's never that simple. And I truly think it's a ability to step back and go, what's the whole situation and what's going on here, if that makes sense. So things that would have probably, like, I don't regret it. I had joked, but I was a non-scholarship cadet that was going to do this for 3 years and then get out and, go to Arthur Anderson and, travel the world, as I was international relations and Russian. So no math, no anything engineering, I was going to go see Russia. So, but truly, I think that, just some of that understanding that, and I don't think that we had the mentor structure that we are building in the armed forces today, that could have at that time said, hey, did you see yourself? Because we're sometimes just still trying to survive. When you're younger, you're young and hungry, and I won't say foolish, but you're just charging hard, and so sometimes that ability to step back, it's taken some age and some wisdom and some great coaching and mentoring to be like, whoa, do you realize that that came across like this, even though we were intending it to be like that? So, so not necessarily regret or change, but I probably would be better now if I hadn't said certain things or acted in certain manners, because I did let emotion or the feeling of the moment not let me see the true situation or the true person, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I need that.
I'm not a hot mess all the time, but maybe when I was younger.
I'm going to go off script because I've had hundreds of interviews, selection panel, I've been in front of a selection board, a promotion board, and there's one question that sticks out. And I was going up against a whole bunch of war heroes, and it was all guys, and it was a position at the Pentagon. And they asked us one question because of how I answered it. That's why I got that job. So I'm going to pose the question to you.
Dun, dun,
It
dun.
really lets them know who you are. So it's fun. So Colonel Vasquez.
Okay, let's do it.
If you could talk to anyone, alive or dead,
Ooh,
and ask them a question, who would it be and what would you ask them?
oh goodness. Aside from family relatives, obviously, like, so, I think it would be kind of, I would go for like, it sounds cheesy, but I would go for like the Nelson Mandela, like you were in prison for how many years? You fought oppression for this amount of time. How did you keep that strength of faith and fortitude to know that something bigger than yourself, you're still part of it and this would overrise. And why I say that is because sometimes just even on a Tuesday, when you're struggling, and you're like, the coffee's not hitting, and it's so easy to get wrapped up in this the world, my little zone, my bubble, whatever it is, and not see that there's something bigger out there. One of the reasons I was drawn to the military is the service. My dad was enlisted. I had a sister who was enlisted who got the GI Bill. They didn't do full careers, but it served the purpose. And then my dad got out to help feed us as well. Enlisted back in the 60s, didn't get paid so well. But it was, how do you, when you're having that moment, just draw that inner strength and know, and I'm not talking about us because I'm going to say we're pretty awesome at Crane, but like it's the bureaucracy, it's the, okay, I'm trying to get answers about the COVID vaccine and my civilians. It is things that I don't control that, you hurt for people, you want to affect, you want to change, and you're just a number, a little pea in the pod, if that makes sense. So how does somebody and this is nothing compared to apartheid. So A, it helps me put myself back in my place to realize that. B, there are bigger things. This will pass, this will change. Hopefully reason will prevail. It happened in the case of South Africa and I know that sounds just crazy, but I kind of think like, how did they deal with that? Okay. My problems are really small and I'm really blessed. So it's just perspective, if that makes sense.
What an awesome answer. Maureen, I can tell you right now, I would not be selected. I was sitting here and I was thinking about, I always wanted to meet my father's father. And so I know that maybe you didn't intend for family, but that was the first thing that crossed my mind. And because I, the Colonel already took Nelson Mandela, I'll just say that the two people very, very influential over my desire to work and to have a career and still to have a family and those things are my father and his mother. And my grandma, when I was growing up, she lived in Florida, and we would go down there over the Christmas break and spend time with her. And she was such a different example for me. So my mom, because my dad drove a truck and was gone all the time, my mom stayed at home and took care of myself and my brother. She did all the PTO meetings and she ran the Girl Scouts, and she was super involved in all that we did and ran our house. And there was never anything too daunting for her. She would carry a big black snake across the yard and dump it over with the cows rather than kill it. And she would kill spiders and fix the lawnmower and just what needed to be done, she did.
And when we would go to visit my grandmother, though, she would go in the restroom and she would put on makeup, and she had heels and a closet full of all of her clothes that she would wear to work. And she was the secretary for the president of Florida Bell at the time. And she bought me my first typewriter. And I already mentioned that my dad, you know, was sort of the work hard guy. And so I've always wondered about his dad because I never had the chance to know him. He had passed before I was born. And so that's you know, that was the first thing that crossed my mind. That's somebody I would like to know and to understand because of how influential, you know, my dad and his family have been on me. And so I think that's where I would go.
Okay, so I also had one pop into my head immediately, and I'm just going to run with it. And it's Eleanor Roosevelt. So I am one of those people that sometimes when I hear a quote that resonates with me, I just write it down, and I have a cute little book where I write these things down. And I have a couple from her in that book. So I think that's why it came to mind. And just side note, one of my favorites from her is no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. That's a great one. That you have to think about that one for a minute, but it's really awesome. But she was one. So my question I would ask her if I got to speak with her is, what was it like to do the things you were doing at the time you were doing them? She was really very, in many ways, ahead of her time, right? It is early 1900s. She was very, very much about, you know, female empowerment in that era. And she was a very wealthy, privileged woman. And yet she spent a lot of time helping care for and set up systems to care for people who are not nearly as fortunate. And I just think that was, you know, not something you would expect. And it's just her personality of what I know just really impresses me. And I just would love to hear, like, what was your life like in that time and place? So yeah, that's who I'd want to do.
Yeah, I had probably 4 go through my head. From a strategy or even just the founding of the country, I would love to have a conversation with George Washington. So we spent almost a decade in Washington, D.C. and spent a lot of time at Mount Vernon and walking through there, literally looking at his library, because then they actually had the books. They hadn't moved them all off and put fake ones there, but literally looking at his books and understanding his daily schedule, getting up early in the morning with candlelight, and the tremendous notes that he took on crops and animals and this whole component of his life that had nothing to do with the country. I mean, truly a farmer, and how he used those skills in politics. And how did he bring people together? How did he have this coalition? How did he fight wars? How did that all work? Because it's not as though there was, you know, went to Air Command and Staff College that told you how to do, you know, military strategy and, you know, plan air campaigns and all this stuff, which isn't frankly that useful anymore. But there wasn't something like that for him. You know, how did he come up with that? What was the conversations that he had around the fire with his group, with his peers, with his cohort? Because that fundamentally changed the trajectory of our country. And what that thought process was, that just fascinates me, not only from the country, from a patriotic standpoint, but also that wasn't the only thing he did. You know, same 24 hours in the day, but even just looking at his daily schedule, like, wow, I'm not busy. You know, I really am not busy by comparison. So I'd go with that.
So the admiral came and said, I want to ask everybody one question. So, you know, first he was going, what's that? What did you earn that medal? Or what do you do different? What would you do different if you did something wrong? I said, I told Elder I'd like to take it over. You know, I was so nervous. I didn't know what to do. But when he came to me, I said, I would like to talk to Chief Martin. These are my chief. So you have to know your audience. And they had met my chief. Chief Martin is the female that made a difference in my military. First female that was the chief and she came in. I never seen anybody act like that. That was female or male. She made you feel like you could do anything. She empowered you, and there was nothing I could say that she didn't have an answer for. And she just pushed you. And why can't you do it? She was from Panama, right? So she had her Spanish going on. I learned a lot of Spanish from her because she'd get mad at me. Stuff. had met my chief, and she was the most aggressive, most professional, no excuses. Like you said, no emotion. You weren't allowed to have emotions. You just did. There's no excuse. So I said, I just want to talk to my chief. Like, I love my job. I love my chief, and I want to be a chief like her. So the question I'm going to say is, where are you going next? Because I want to go with her. And they said, oh, they loved it. So you have to know your audience. But I mean, people were saying all these great people, and those are good things. But if you really love somebody, that was my heart, because I had never met. That was like the one person. Oh, which is the next question? We don't say that. You know, that was the tipping point in my life, because you're always a good worker. There's lots of good workers, right? And like Angie, I was taught to always my mom, right? Couldn't swear, I couldn't bad. I had to smile. Couldn't say ain't. So all the manners, and so I didn't really step out of line or anything. I just stayed in line. But when Chief Martin said, why can't you be CLE? You're better than them. You know, no excuse, no problem. You know, and you're like, oh, okay, yes, I can. You know, and so if you meet someone like that, that changes your whole trajectory. Just one person. And Angela, Dr. Lewis is also one person that I wouldn't have made out of Crane. I came right from the military, where I just told you and I here, to being civilian. And so you need somebody to mentor you, to get you. It's never been in that environment. When I first got hired on at Crane, the first thing to do was bring people on board. And Angie wasn't my mentor. I had another mentor, but I set up the interviews, and my boss, the big boss, Connie Lacer, said, just get the SF-50s. I said, I didn't know what SF-50 was, and I said, oh, okay, no problem. So I just kept putting them on my desk, and then they're supposed to come in, and it was Neil Embry, one of the ones I was hiring, our old technical director. His son was on there, and they said, when they come in? I said, I don't know. I guess I'll bring them in 2 weeks. They said, you process the 50s. I said, what's that? They're on my desk. You just said get the 50s. I got them. They're good, right? And they're like, no, right? Yeah, and then in new ways it's screwed up. So in comes Angela Lewis, and another trajectory. It wasn't for Angela. And again, she was so professional. Everybody went to Angie for the answer. When she changed her hair, it was like of the day. It was on the announcement of the day. People were calling, what do you mean you changed your hair? It was Rachel. So she was just an influencer, and everybody came to her. She solved problems. These women up here solved problems, and that's what that made a difference. Is men always solve problems. If you have a problem, find a man. If my computer doesn't work, I'll find it. But these women solve problems, and if you ever be remembered in your life for anything, it's going to be one of two things: the problems you solve or the problems you create. And these women have solved problems in Smithson. Do you have any questions from the audience? Because I could ask questions. Hey, I like that. Any questions?
My question would be, but how do you approach that now, like the home line, and also how they have those conversations on family?
We're live streaming, so the question was, how do you balance your career and your family? The question was, how do you balance your family and work life?
So I would probably answer that, especially with about a decade at the Pentagon, is it's not necessarily balance. It's trying to figure out which plates you are going to keep spinning, which plates you cannot drop, and how to try to enlist help where you need to. And I think that's part of the challenge, is being very self-sufficient, is that it's very difficult to ask for help. But try to find where you can ask for help with things helps you keep that balance better. My husband was deployed quite a few times. We lived in Colorado for 3 years. He always kept a map in his truck because he didn't live there long enough to actually know where any of the roads or what they were or how to get other than back and forth to the airport. But during that time when he was deployed, he was injured in combat, the house flooded. We actually had to move out of a house because the military owners exercised their right to come back within 30 days, even though we had a lease. So that was a new one, a reverse military clause for any military out there. And so I actually had to handle all of that unexpectedly and still work. And I worked in a family support center where I was the financial counselor and the transition counselor helping other military. So it was kind of ironic that I'm like, well, at least I know all the helping agencies. I know what to do. But part of that was asking for help. And I was fortunate to have a boss that I could say, look, I really need to do X, but this is how I'm either going to delegate the work, how I'm going to have someone else teach the investments class, or just go forward with the plan. And I'm a planner, so that helped me tremendously. But not being afraid to ask for help and to understand the way that you ask makes a difference usually in the answer. If you just say, I need to take time off, that generates a different response normally from your supervisor than to say, here's what I need to do, here's a plan, here's how it's covered, and just being prepared and making sure you communicate quickly was the key for me. I wouldn't say it's still balanced, but we try every day.
All points I completely agree with, very well said. I'll actually try to hit something different back up, maybe half a step with regard to making the decisions about, whether or not to take that assignment or move, 700 miles away. A lot of conversations, right? Especially if it's, not just you, right? If you're at a point where you have spouse and family and things, a lot of conversations. And back to what I said earlier about really thinking hard about what's important to you and your family and it works for you. And from the perspective of not being constrained by what other people think or have done in the past. When I transferred up to Crane, I came up by myself at first, a whole situation behind that. That surprised a lot of people, right? I think many men sometimes will go and, go to the new position or whatever. And it's not shocking if the family stays behind, but it was me, right? So that kind of made people wonder what was going on there. And was my marriage in jeopardy? Not at all. And so, it settled out eventually. But so I think, again, just really think about what works for you, what you need, what your career goals are, and have those conversations with the other people who are important, who will be impacted by that, and make the decision that works for you.
I was trying to figure out, I've moved jobs a lot at Crane. And so at the time that I did my first offsite rotation, I went just to headquarters for a couple of weeks and then went another time for a couple of weeks and then went another time for a week. So that wasn't too disruptive. It was very much travel like. At the time that I decided to go down to Panama City, I was contemplating what I was going to do in my next job because I'd been in corporate operations for 5 years and just felt like I needed to be figuring out what would be next. We thought that the potential of living in Florida was a good one for our family, maybe. And so I did 3 months rather than, like a lot of people will go for 6 months or a full year. And that 3 months was invaluable to me. It was not the easiest thing. And it, it did take a lot of conversations and making sure that everybody was good with it. It took, kind of patience and understanding, not only from a family perspective, but also at work. And so the new team that I was going to be a part of had to understand, like, for example, my oldest daughter was pregnant at that time, and everyone knew that, if she went into labor or whatever, I would be going back to Indiana regardless of when it was. And so I just think you have to have open, honest conversations. I don't think it's required to go off and get perspective someplace else, but it certainly is helpful. And don't discount the way that you can do that even inside of the fence line at Crane, from organization to organization, or what you can do in doing, rotations with maybe industry, or what you can do from a volunteer perspective within the communities, because it is all just about perspective and seeing things from different angles. And so there's lots of ways to do that. It doesn't always have to be a formal assignment. So we always have opportunities at Crane Army. I'm just throwing that out there. No, so I'm a little different in that perspective. I'm not married. for me, we were in different brigades and he went to Iraq and they extended him from 15 to 17 months while I was deployed to Afghanistan. So at this point, I've moved 17 times and once every year for the last 4 years. So the ability to have stability is not always conducive. So a couple of things. One, I would not say I have balance in life, but what I do have is a prioritization of, things that are important to me and how much I have to be honest about what the time is spent on what that is every time. Secondly, family takes all different forms. So family to me at this point is obviously mom, immediate family, but it's become the network that I have, gained, which is whether it's the new Crane network or it's the past, I'm just gathering friends and they're coming along with me, whether it's the change of command and they come from different states or, so don't discount what a support system looks like. And you have to have one. So regardless that I'm not married at this point, the support system exists because, the flooding in the house that I owned in Colorado absolutely happened when I was at Bagram. So property managers are awesome and invest in a good one. So it's a little bit of that, but I would also just be honest in saying, I'm a big planner and what they have taught us from the get-go is making 5 and 10 year plans. So what we have, every subordinate that I've had, I have them lay out not only just where they are and their education and career goals, et cetera, but list your children. What grades of school are they going to be in? If you do option A, right? Does this mean they're missing the high school year? Does this mean they're going to have to move mid-year? Does one really want to play football or are they on a travel team for softball, et cetera? You have to take into account, along with that honest conversation with your spouse or significant other, what is that going to do to impact the family? Because there's always pluses and minuses. And knowing that in that column, hey, this is 3 months in Florida, but I'm missing homecoming, such and such and such. At the end of the day, this is my priority because this is my family, because I can always do this internship later. And it's just really, truly about that honest conversation, but just being honest with yourself too, because I would tell you when I was 23, there wasn't a military, there was a husband and kids. And now I would say I'm not married right now, but I have a gorgeous dog and I have this extended support network. And I've prioritized at this point that this is my job first right now, just because I move again in 2 years and we're in the middle of Indiana somewhere. So, and if you don't work for me, you work for Dr. Lewis and her folks. And then, but anyway, I digress.
Our time a little bit, but please stay with us and join us. We're going to have some light refreshments. We have a cash bar and we'd love for you to stay around so we can talk to you and get to know you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's give them a quick round of applause. I'm 28, born and raised in this area, but you guys were all really inspiring. And I just realized how young and short yet I am in my career. And there's a long way to go, but you guys gave some great insight. So thank you so much. We would like to thank the federally employed women of the Hoosier Hills chapter for collaborating with us for tonight's First Tuesday event and for also sponsoring the light refreshments we have this evening. We would also like to thank these accomplished panelists for taking the time out of their very busy schedules to provide some great insight and advice on where they came from and where they are going. We are truly inspired by you. Now on to the fun part. Please continue these conversations as we spill out to our balcony and have some light refreshments and drinks. As always, please continue to check our social media channels and websites for future events. Next month, Brooke Pine with Two Smarts and director of NSTXL will be here to talk about her office and how it's had an impact on businesses within Indiana. That will be on December 7th. So thank you everyone for coming, and we can now go have some fun.